The restaurant was alive with the usual buzz of clinking glasses, soft music, and quiet conversations, but all that noise seemed to fade when he walked in. Everyone noticed him. The billionaire whose face had graced magazines, whose name was whispered with awe, and whose fortune seemed limitless. He carried himself like the world belonged to him. His suit sharp, his watch glistening under the warm lights, and his confidence so loud it demanded attention. People couldn't help but turn their heads, some curious, some envious, and a few simply intimidated. He was used to this kind of reaction. After all, he had spent years building an image of success and untouchable power. But for him, tonight wasn't about the food or the company. It was about being seen. He wanted to remind the world that wealth meant status, that luxury meant respect. And for that, he chose the most visible table in the center of the restaurant. Sitting back in his chair, he scanned the room with a sense of superiority, until his eyes landed on her. The waitress who carried herself quietly, her smile polite but tired, her uniform neat but simple. There was something about her presence that he didn't like. Perhaps it was the way she didn't seem impressed by him, or the way she treated every customer the same, as if his money didn't make him more important than anyone else. When she approached his table with her notepad in hand, he leaned forward with a smirk. "You must be new here," he said, his tone sharp with condescension. She nodded softly and asked for his order, keeping her voice steady. But he wasn't really interested in the food. He was interested in her. In the way she moved. In the way she didn't flinch even when he tried to make her feel small. And so, he began to mock her. His words, casual at first, grew sharper with each passing second. He joked about her simple shoes, her worn-out bag, and her life that he assumed was filled with nothing but struggle. Laughter followed from a couple of people sitting nearby who overheard his words, and for a moment, the billionaire basked in the attention. The waitress, however, didn't break. Her smile didn't falter, her hands didn't tremble. She listened quietly, her eyes meeting his with a calmness that unsettled him. He expected her to shrink, to walk away, or to apologize for simply being who she was. But instead, she stood there, patient, almost as if she was waiting for the right moment. And when she slowly reached into her bag, the room seemed to pause. The billionaire leaned back, a mocking grin still lingering on his face, but behind that grin was a flicker of curiosity. What could a poor waitress possibly have in her bag that would matter in a place like this? The clinking of cutlery stopped. Conversations hushed. All eyes turned toward her as she pulled something out, something that wiped the smirk clean off his face. The billionaire, who thought he had seen it all, suddenly found himself stunned. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted in the most unexpected way. What she revealed was not what anyone expected, and it would change everything that followed. For a long moment, the billionaire could not find his words. His eyes, so used to commanding a room, now darted between the small object she held in her hand and the faces of the curious diners who leaned in, desperate to understand what was happening. The waitress did not speak right away. Instead, she placed the object gently on the edge of his table. Her calm composure a sharp contrast to the tension that now filled the air. People whispered in hushed voices, but no one dared break the silence fully. Whatever was happening, it was more than just a clash between wealth and humility. It was something far deeper. The billionaire cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked, forcing a laugh, though his voice cracked slightly. He wanted to dismiss it as a joke, a stunt, anything that could restore his sense of dominance. But the waitress did not respond with words. Instead, her eyes locked onto his with a steadiness that unsettled him even further. There was no anger in her expression, no bitterness, only a quiet strength that seemed to carry a story no one else in the room knew. To the other diners, she was just a young woman serving food, someone easily overlooked in the shadow of wealth and luxury. But in that instant, it became clear there was much more behind her uniform, behind her tired yet graceful smile. She carried a weight that no mocking comment could strip away, and whatever she had just placed on his table seemed to hold the key to that hidden truth. The billionaire leaned closer, his curiosity burning stronger now than his arrogance. He had built his empire on knowing people, on reading their weaknesses and exploiting them. Yet this woman was unreadable. She wasn't flustered, she wasn't desperate, and she wasn't begging for respect. If anything, she seemed to be silently reminding him that respect was never his to give or take. It was something earned, something rooted in truth. As the room held its breath, memories of his own rise to fortune flickered in his mind. He had known poverty once, long ago, before the headlines and the millions. He had promised himself he would never return to that life. Maybe that was why he mocked her so quickly, because in her presence, he saw pieces of a past he tried so hard to bury. Yet, unlike him, she did not seem ashamed of her struggle. She wore it like a badge, and that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. The waitress finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm, carrying enough weight to silence the murmurs in the room. She did not explain herself fully, only offered a few words that hinted at a story none of them had expected. "Not everything is as it seems," she said, her tone steady. Then she glanced briefly at the object on the table before picking it back up and slipping it once more into her bag. The action only deepened the mystery, leaving the billionaire and everyone else craving an answer that she refused to give just yet. The billionaire straightened in his chair, his smirk completely gone now. Instead of mockery, there was something else in his eyes, unease, even doubt. He had entered the restaurant believing he controlled the narrative, but now the waitress had stolen that control without raising her voice, without demanding attention. She had left him and the entire room hanging in suspense. And as she walked away to serve another table, the billionaire realized he could no longer shake the question that now gnawed at him. Who was she really, and what secret did she carry that could turn the balance of power so quickly? The answer, he knew, would not be simple, and it might be something he wasn't prepared to face. The billionaire couldn't stop replaying the moment in his mind. The way she had reached into her bag, the way the room had gone silent, and the way his own confidence had slipped so quickly. It all unsettled him in a way money couldn't fix. He tried to brush it off, laughing lightly at his companion's puzzled glances, but deep down he knew that something about the waitress wasn't ordinary. She had walked away as if she knew more than she was letting on, as if she held a card he hadn't expected anyone to play. Across the room, the diners were still whispering. Some had caught a glimpse of what she revealed, while others only saw his reaction. The mystery grew larger with every quiet conversation, and soon the entire restaurant buzzed with curiosity. For years, the billionaire had controlled how people looked at him, always powerful, always untouchable. Yet now, one small interaction had left people questioning who truly held the upper hand. The waitress moved gracefully from table to table, her demeanor unchanged, as though nothing unusual had happened. But those who looked closely noticed a shift in the way others saw her. Customers who once ignored her now watched carefully, intrigued by the confidence that seemed to wrap around her like a hidden shield. Even her co-workers, who had always seen her as just another struggling employee, exchanged glances, wondering if they had underestimated her all this time. The billionaire's business partner, seated at the same table, leaned closer and whispered, "Do you know her?" There was tension in his voice, the kind that suggested he sensed more to the story. The billionaire shook his head, though his eyes stayed fixed on her. "No," he muttered, "but I'm starting to think I should." For a man used to knowing everyone who mattered, the idea that someone could walk into his world and remain an enigma was intolerable. As the night continued, the billionaire found himself distracted, barely touching his food. His thoughts drifted to the possibility that she wasn't just a waitress. Was she connected to someone important? Was she carrying something tied to his past, something he had worked hard to keep hidden? He hated the uncertainty, the not knowing. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, a quieter subplot was unfolding. One of the older waiters, a man who had been at the restaurant for years, approached her while she refilled glasses of water. "You handled that well," he said softly, though his eyes carried questions. "But are you sure it's wise to draw attention like that?" She gave him a small smile, the kind that carried more meaning than words. Sometimes attention finds you whether you want it or not, she replied before moving on. Her words only deepened the sense that she was carrying a story much bigger than her role here. The billionaire, still restless, decided he couldn't let the night end without answers. He excused himself from the table and followed her discreetly as she walked toward the back with a tray of dishes. She paused at the counter, setting the tray down, and before she could turn, he spoke, his voice low but sharp. "What game are you playing?" She froze for only a second, then turned with that same calm expression. "The only game here," she said gently, "is the one you've been playing with people all your life." Her words cut deeper than he expected. For once, he didn't have a clever reply. And in that silence, he realized something dangerous. The waitress wasn't just holding a secret. She was forcing him to face a part of himself he had spent years trying to bury. The conflict between them wasn't just about wealth or status anymore. It was something personal, something that threatened to unravel both their worlds. Yet still she gave nothing away. The object, the story behind it, her reason for confronting him, it all remained hidden, leaving him caught between anger, curiosity, and fear of what might come next. The mystery only grew heavier, and the night was far from over. The billionaire's heart pounded faster than he would admit as he stood there, staring at her across the narrow space of the restaurant's back corridor. For a man who had faced ruthless boardroom battles, courtroom fights, and negotiations worth billions, it was strange that a single waitress could make him feel cornered. Yet she wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic. Her silence carried more weight than the wealth he wore like armor. Every word she had spoken so far felt like a thread tugging at a hidden part of his past, something he thought he had buried under success and luxury. He wanted to demand answers, but the way she looked at him made him hesitate. It was not the look of someone intimidated. It was the look of someone who knew more than they should. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked, his tone sharper than intended. He expected her to ask for money, to admit this was some clever scheme to take advantage of his status. Instead, she simply tilted her head, her voice calm, almost whisper-like. "What I want doesn't cost money. It costs honesty." The words rattled him. Honesty. A simple demand, but one that cut deeper than any insult. For years, he had lived behind layers of wealth, crafting a story of brilliance and determination while hiding the cracks in between. But how could she know that? The question burned in his chest, and he wasn't the only one sensing the weight of the moment. Back in the dining hall, people noticed his absence. The murmurs grew louder. His business partner, already uneasy, excused himself and followed, trying to catch sight of what was happening. He stopped just short of the corridor, hidden by the corner, listening. What he heard unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The billionaire, usually composed and untouchable, sounded vulnerable. That was not the man he knew. The waitress leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You mock people for being poor, as if that makes them invisible. But sometimes the people you overlook are the ones you should remember most." Her words lingered, and though she didn't explain, they felt loaded, as if she was speaking about more than just herself. The billionaire's chest tightened. A faint memory surfaced. Faces, places, mistakes he had locked away. He clenched his jaw, refusing to let the emotion show. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his voice betrayed a tremor. She reached into her bag again, and his body tensed, every muscle bracing for the unknown. The sound of the zipper felt deafening in the quiet corridor. His business partner leaned closer, holding his breath. Even a busboy walking past slowed his steps, sensing the moment carried more weight than any ordinary dispute. She pulled out the same object she had shown before, holding it just out of the light so only he could see. His face drained of color, his smirk long gone. This time he couldn't hide his reaction. Whatever she was showing him, it wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. It tied them together in a way no one else yet understood. The tension hung so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were listening. He wanted to grab it from her hand to end the mystery, to regain control, but he couldn't move. His voice broke into a whisper, trembling with both anger and fear. "Where did you get that?" The waitress didn't answer. Instead, she tucked it back into her bag, looked him in the eye, and gave a quiet, steady reply. "You'll have to face it sooner or later. And tonight, everyone will know." The billionaire froze, realizing the storm he had mocked into existence was about to consume him. The night was spiraling toward something he could no longer stop, and the entire room waited for the truth to erupt. The climax was moments away, and all he could do now was brace for impact. The billionaire's pulse quickened as her words echoed in his head. "Tonight, everyone will know." For a man who had built his life on control, those words cut deeper than any insult. He could feel his carefully constructed image teetering, and for the first time in years, fear crept into his chest. But before he could react, another voice pierced the tension. His business partner, who had been silently watching from the shadows, stepped forward. "I think I deserve to know what this is about," the partner said, his eyes narrowing at both of them. The billionaire stiffened, knowing his partner was the last person he wanted tangled in this moment. Their empire was built on appearances, on trust and loyalty, and if even a sliver of doubt cracked that foundation, the whole structure could crumble. The waitress turned slowly, her calm gaze meeting the partner's suspicious stare. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. Instead, she said softly, "You've been working beside him for years, but do you really know who he is?" The partner frowned, his curiosity rising. "What are you suggesting?" The billionaire tried to cut in, his voice sharp, desperate. "She's playing games. Don't listen to her." But his words lacked their usual weight. His partner had never heard that tone from him before. It wasn't the commanding voice of a leader. It was the shaky defense of a man on the edge. And then, with deliberate slowness, the waitress reached into her bag again. This time she didn't hide what she pulled out. She placed it in plain view, letting the dim light fall across its surface. Gasps echoed down the corridor as both men stared at the object. It wasn't just a personal memento or some trivial item. It was something that hinted at a connection neither of them had expected. The partner's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Why do you have this?" he asked, his voice tight, almost accusing. The billionaire's face drained of color, his eyes darting between the waitress and his partner. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence spoke louder than any explanation. The partner suddenly stepped closer, lowering his voice but keeping his anger sharp. "You told me this was gone. You told me it was buried." The room seemed to shrink. The billionaire realized the stakes had just doubled. It wasn't only about the waitress exposing him. It was about his entire world unraveling in front of someone who had the power to destroy him from within. For years, he had trusted his partner with half of his empire, believing secrets could be controlled. But now, the truth was clawing its way to the surface, and the waitress was holding the key. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The things you hide eventually find their way back," she said, her tone steady, almost haunting. "And this is only the beginning." The billionaire's hands clenched at his sides. He could feel eyes from the dining hall now drifting toward the commotion, the whispers spreading faster than he could stop them. His reputation, his fortune, even his partnership, all of it stood on a knife's edge. And the worst part was, he had no idea how much the waitress truly knew, or how far she was willing to go. The second twist had left him cornered from all sides. What began as mockery in a restaurant was now turning into a public reckoning, and the billionaire realized the night was rushing toward a climax that could cost him everything. The corridor felt too small for the weight of what hung in the air. The billionaire's polished composure had shattered, and now his business partner stood in stunned silence, his trust slipping away with every second. The waitress held the object firmly in her hand, and though she hadn't explained its full meaning, the truth was beginning to unfold on its own. Everyone could sense it. This was no coincidence, no ordinary clash between the wealthy and the working. This was personal, and it was about to unravel everything the billionaire had tried to keep hidden. Finally, the partner broke the silence, his voice sharp with betrayal. You lied to me. All these years you made me believe the past was gone. But it wasn't, was it? His words landed like a hammer, and the billionaire flinched. He tried to find a way back to smooth it over as he always did, but the waitress stepped in before he could twist the story. You mocked me for being poor, she said, her voice steady but filled with quiet fire. But you never looked closely enough to see who I really was. You thought I was invisible. But the truth is, you've known me before and you chose to forget. The billionaire blinked, his mind racing, until the memory struck him like a blow. Years ago, before the mansions and luxury, before his name was celebrated, there had been a different version of him. Hungry, desperate, reckless. He had made mistakes then, cruel choices that hurt people he thought he'd never see again. And one of those people was standing right in front of him now. Not a faceless stranger but someone who had lived through the consequences of his actions. The object she held was proof. A faded document tied to his past, something he had sworn would never resurface. It was linked to a debt he had buried, not just financial but personal, involving a family whose struggles he had ignored while he climbed toward his empire. And the waitress, she was part of that family. She had carried the scars quietly, until fate brought her back to him in the most unexpected way. The billionaire's face burned with shame as realization spread across the crowd gathering near the corridor. Whispers turned into stares, and for the first time, he felt stripped of the armor money had always given him. His partner's expression hardened, no longer confused but resolved. If you could lie about this, what else have you hidden? He asked coldly, and with that, the partnership that had built an empire began to crumble. The waitress, however, didn't raise her voice in triumph. She didn't need to. She simply placed the object on the counter, her hands steady. I didn't come here for revenge, she said softly, her eyes fixed on the billionaire. I came to remind you that people are not stepping stones. The past has a way of catching up, no matter how far you climb. It felt like the end, the truth finally out, but then came the twist no one saw coming. As she turned to walk away, the partner stopped her. Wait, he said, his tone shifting. You've proven he can't be trusted. But what if you're not here just to expose him? What if you want something more? The room froze again. The billionaire stared, realization dawning. His downfall hadn't just come from an old secret. It might also have been set in motion by someone closer than he ever imagined. The waitress's eyes flickered, giving nothing away, leaving everyone questioning whether the real twist was yet to be revealed. The climax had struck, the empire cracked wide open, and just when it seemed the story had resolved, a new layer of mystery slipped in, ensuring the billionaire's night of reckoning was far from over. The restaurant felt as though it had turned into a stage, with every diner waiting to see how the story would end. The billionaire, once the center of admiration, now stood exposed, his arrogance stripped away. The waitress, who he had mocked for being poor, had revealed not only a part of his past but also a truth he had long tried to bury. His business partner, shaken by betrayal, no longer looked at him with trust but with suspicion, knowing their empire was built on cracks far deeper than either had admitted. For a long moment no one spoke. The weight of silence was heavier than any words could be. Finally, the billionaire lowered his head, his voice breaking through the tension. You're right, he said quietly, almost to himself. I thought I could bury the past. I thought money would erase it. But it never does. His words carried no charm, no arrogance, only a rare honesty. Those who listened realized they were hearing a man admit his weakness, perhaps for the first time in his life. The waitress didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Instead, she nodded slowly, her expression calm. The past doesn't have to destroy you, she said. But it has to change you. People remember how you make them feel, not how much you're worth. Her words were simple, yet they lingered in the room like an unshakable truth. The partner stepped back, torn between anger and reflection. He had built his fortune alongside a man who had hidden so much, and yet, he couldn't deny the lesson unfolding in front of him. Maybe this is what you needed, he said, his voice flat. Not another deal, not another spotlight. But a reminder that respect can't be bought. His tone made it clear their partnership was over, but it also hinted at something deeper. A chance for the billionaire to face the consequences honestly, without excuses. The diners slowly returned to their meals, though their eyes still lingered on the scene. For them, the night had turned into something unforgettable, a story they would carry with them. They hadn't just witnessed a clash between wealth and humility. They had seen proof that even the most powerful could be humbled, that money alone could not shield anyone from truth. The waitress picked up her tray and walked back toward her work, her steps steady. She hadn't come to ruin him. She had come to remind him, and everyone watching, that no one is invisible, and no one's story should be dismissed because of where they stand. For her, that was enough. The billionaire sank back into his chair, his mind heavy with what had just unfolded. His empire might still stand, but the foundation had cracked, and he knew he would never see the world the same way again. For the first time he felt the weight of what it meant to listen, to really see the people around him. The night ended not with triumph or applause, but with quiet reflection. The billionaire was left to face the truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding, while the waitress returned to her duties with dignity and tact. The partner walked away, determined to rebuild on honesty rather than secrets. And the diners left with a story that reminded them of something bigger than wealth. The value of humility, integrity, and respect. In the end, the billionaire learned that the true measure of a person isn't counted in dollars or status, but in the way they treat others when no one is watching. And though his world had shifted forever, it left behind a lesson that would outlast fortune or fame, a reminder that humanity is worth more than gold.